Hey all, Hipper here. Today we are diving into the tier 4 cruisers, and it's been a while since I've played the Emile Bertin, and this is an agile build with Rouen and Baltimore and Takao and Ingenious and full speed ahead and go all out, and you can choose the speed there instead if you want, but and here steer clear and fully packed. An agile build, except I picked go all out instead of more speed because this ship already goes about 42 knots, so that's fine. So 3 sonars and same planes, about 14 range and 12-second reload, so it's a long reload for a tier 4 cruiser, but the thing with this cruiser is that if you line up a broadside cruiser and you're firing AP, you are very likely to be rewarded with a bunch of Citadels. And I like the consistency of this cruiser here. It's sort of similar to Königsberg at the same tier, just a German one. It's also mainly an AP ship, and it's also accurate and dependable. And that's really what I want in a cruiser. It has to be dependable. Like if I line up for Citadels and I'm expecting Citadels, then I also want Citadels. It's the worst when you're trying to plan your moves ahead and you're thinking, oh, I'll turn this way and then I'll Citadel this guy and then I'll turn that way and I'll just short torps that way. And then when you're making a plan like that and like something that should be a sure Citadel turns out to be an overpen or something, and you have to, like, on the fly, just rethink your whole approach. And that's just annoying. So I much prefer ships that are like dependable, like Bertin here. That's 3 Citadels there, and the same reason with Hipper at tier 7. It's also very dependable when it comes to Citadels on cruisers at the very least. And the same with Agile Emile. It's also well, unless you muck up, then you're pretty sure to well, score some pretty nasty Citadels if you got everything lined up. And some cruisers that are the direct opposite of these guys here, they spring to mind, and one of the first ones I think about is Siegfried. Very unstable ship, really, I think. And the same with Azuma. Unless you're shooting HE, it's like a total crapshoot if you get Citadels or not. And usually Citadels take a bit of planning on your part and an error on the opponent's part, and that's why it's just so important to get the Citadels when they are available. And that's also one of the reasons that I don't play battleships much, because I think they are too inaccurate, and that's why primarily I like cruisers, and I primarily like armor piercing, like focused cruisers. If, and that's a big if I enjoy the ballistics on those cruisers. So for example, Baltimore is a cruiser that's very AP focused, but I don't like that ship at all. I don't like the ballistics on the shells, and yeah, it's just not my kind of ship. The same thing with Indianapolis. It's also very AP focused, but yeah, the shell trajectory and the ballistics as a whole, yeah, just not my thing. I much prefer what you get with Hipper, Prince Eugen, and Agile Emile. And also notice that I'm not mentioning any Russians because I prefer the French and German ballistics to the Russians. I know a lot of people talk about Russian rail guns and all that stuff, but yeah, honestly, I've always had trouble seeing what is so rail gunny like about them. I mean, yes, they don't have much of an arc, but that's about it. And yeah, as I've said a few times, I much prefer the German version and also the French. Edinburgh is also an AP cruiser I like a lot for obvious reasons. It only has AP, if you didn't know, but that's pretty much its specialty. But of course, if I play Atago or Susuya, I don't play Susuya much, and I actually don't play Atago a lot anymore. But if I play Atago or Agile Emile, for example, I shoot a lot of HE, simply because the HE is just so good on those ships. And they have such a long reload, so I don't really consider them HE spammers. I mean, they're still... Atago is 15 seconds, which is like some battleships shoot faster than Atago. And I believe Emile is about 11 seconds or something like that. And the HE hits really hard on Emile, and it's good fire chance, and the reload is faster than Atago. But calling Emile an HE spammer, I think, is pushing it a little bit. So Bertin here, just got a high caliber there. I didn't even notice that when I played the game. As I said, Bertin, it is a really good AP ship. It's also decent at HE, but really what you should be doing in this ship here is look for broadsides, and especially on softer targets down at tier 3 and also tier 4, obviously. When you get to tier 5, you are a little bit more limited in who you'll be able to totally ruffle stomp. But if you're facing like tier 3s like I am in this battle here, you are going to have a massive advantage in this ship here. Same thing with Königsberg. It's also just, as soon as it's top tier, it's just nuts, basically. Another must I have to have on my cruisers, well, I don't have to, but I much prefer it, is torpedoes. I need them because I'm an aggressive player, and I sometimes, well, pretty much all the time, I guess, push in a little bit too close sometimes. And it's good to have torpedoes to get you out of a tight spot, or to slow the enemies down, or whatever you want to do with them. I mean, they're just so useful. And then, of course, sonar. Like, sonar is probably the most important skill, or whatever you want to call it, to have on your cruiser. Yes, you have to be close to the enemies to actually use it, but that just means that you'll be forced to push in. You cannot rely on radars, and especially at the lower tiers here, sonar is just so powerful, really powerful, because sometimes people don't really understand the game fully, and you'll be able to spot destroyers through islands and all kinds of interesting stuff. Like, radar always gets a lot of publicity, and people love radar, but if you look at it like objectively, radar only lasts 30 seconds on average, some nations a little bit more, while sonar can last up to 3 minutes or something like that. So if you're sitting in a cap and you have your sonar on, you can cap the whole cap, which takes a minute, and still have a minute left of your sonar to keep destroyers at bay. And that's really why I think sonar is just so powerful, especially on the German cruisers, where you get the even better range, and also on the British cruisers, where you get a longer lasting sonar. Or that could be on the destroyers, I can't remember that anyway, but it is good on both the British and the Germans, which also happens to be, I think, my favorite cruiser lines, just because they have so much utility. So we've done mostly AP in this battle here, but now we are facing battleships and a single destroyer, so it makes sense simply to switch to HE, because these two battleships here are pretty much full health, and there is no way I can whittle them down by myself. I do have an agile build on this Bertin here, but at tier 4, an agile build translates to having a rudder at about 5 or 6 seconds, and of course that's not exactly fast. I mean, go up to tier 7 and you can have a rudder at 1.3 seconds, so like pretty much 5 times slower or something like that. But you have to look at the agile build as a relative thing, because obviously you're not at tier 7, you're at tier 4, and everything happens at a slower pace down here, so a 5-second rudder is actually very good. It's one of the fastest you can get. And if you looked at my build in the beginning, you saw that I use Roux for this cruiser here. I always do that pretty much on any French cruiser. I always use the agile commanders, or the defensive commanders, or the solo commanders, whatever you want to call them. And on this ship here, this guy makes a lot of sense. And something that most people forget when they're picking commanders is that with these like particular commanders here that I use, you usually get the offensive base trait for free. I mean, with the Ru here, you get 5% extra HE damage for free because it's included with the commander. And with Lütjens, the German Agile commander, you get an extra 5% AP damage. And that's just for free. That comes with your Agile build. And many people forget about that. They put like an aggressive commander on, and then they put the Agile commander on as an inspiration. And I do it the opposite way, really. So, tier 4 cruisers in general. Like I said, I don't spend a lot of time down here because primarily I can't get the ships agile enough for my liking. I mean, like I said, yes, this is an agile build, but it's nowhere near as fun as at tier 7. And that's a bit of a shame, actually. So I'm kind of hoping that perhaps some new premiums will come out down here at tier 3 and 4 that will allow me to play a ship at this tier with, let's say, a 3-second rudder. 2 seconds would be better, but 3, I can live with 3. Like Exeter at tier 5 gets 3.3 seconds as one of the fastest rudders at that tier. But I would love to see a ship down here in tier 3. I know Yubari can go down to 3 seconds, but I mean, that one is, yeah, I guess it's not a bad ship, but it's just not what I'm looking for in an agile cruiser. For example, it doesn't have sonar, and I mean, that's a big no-no for me. Another thing I don't like much about these lower tiers here, and you can see it in action here, like the battleships, they pretty much have all the power here. Every single cruiser at the lower tiers, they are really, really squishy, and if you get hit by a battleship, it's very likely you're getting Citadel if you're not gonna get sunk right away. And really, down here, tier 3 and 4, battleships are king. And once you get up to tier 7, then cruisers are king, definitely. It hasn't always been like that. When the game came out, it was a battleships game. Definitely a battleships game or a destroyers game. It was definitely not a cruisers game, because the only cruisers available were Baltimore and what else did we have? We only had a few. We had Mogami as well, and we didn't have any British cruisers, so it was a very limited selection. And then after a while we got a few premiums, and we got Hipper and Martel, but it wasn't really until the Russians came out, the Russian light cruisers like Kutuzov and Chapayev, that people actually started to play cruisers regularly at tier 7. Up until then, I was usually always the only cruiser in the match, perhaps sometimes on both teams, and that's not a bad thing. I mean, that means there's a lot of battleships to farm and a lot of destroyers to whack, and with an agile build, it's like, it was good fun back in the early days. So these days, cruisers are much more popular at the higher tiers, especially at tier 7. I mean, usually cruisers outnumber battleships in the games, at least at the moment, and they have been for about the last year. Of course, those cruisers are almost exclusively the HE spamming kind, like Cleveland, Ochakov, and Weimar, and now also Mainz. Baltimore is also quite popular, but you see very few Hippers and very, very few Charles Martel. That's a very rare one, which is a shame. But that's just the way the game is. I mean, yes, I get it. HE focused cruisers, they are much easier to play than some of the other cruisers available. So yeah, I totally get it. And especially battleships have also had a few nasty buffs and some new inspirations coming their way, which has made cruiser or play a lot more challenging at tier 7. Especially divisions using will to rebuild. I mean, that is just that's a little bit too much in my opinion. I think it skews the balance of the game. But that's a whole other discussion here. So that was Emile Bertin at tier 4, 116,000 damage, yeah, nearly 3,000 XP, and 3 kills. So I hope you enjoyed the battle, and I'll see you out there.